Amrita is a former CMO and marketing leader working with global FTSE companies. Amrita understands the pressure of high-stress living. She retrained and is the founder of Freedom School, which aims to help people thrive through resilience and mindset coaching programs. She teaches breathwork, meditation, and yoga, and is currently training in somatic stress release. She has also trained in the science of well-being and embodied neuroscience, studying with the UC Berkeley Greater Good Science Center and the University of Pennsylvania. Amrita, over to you.
Hi, my name is Amrita, and I'm the founder of the Freedom School. We run programs that help people find resilience and their flow states. Today, I'm going to talk to you about how the hero's journey from myths and legends and the Wizard of Oz can help us live a more free life. First of all, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and imagine that there is a huge storm outside. You're in the middle of a raging tornado. You can hear the winds howling outside. There is a continuous roar. Your house has been swept up, and you can see all your loved ones flying past your window, caught up in the wind. You're afraid and alone. I'm of course describing the opening scene of The Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy begins her hero's journey. Now, what is this hero's journey? Well, it's an idea created by Joseph Campbell. Now, he was an amazing scholar and thinker, and he spent his entire life researching every myth and story from all over the world, from Arthurian legends to Native American tribal stories to religions. And what he noticed was that there is a pattern to all of these stories, that no matter what the culture or the country or even the time of the story, there is one kind of universal journey which he called the hero's journey. And actually, he was a friend of George Lucas, and the first Star Wars was built on the idea of the hero's journey. So how can that help us today? Well, first of all, the hero's journey is never a quest for happiness. I'm sorry to say that, as we're at a happiness festival. You know, some of the well-being culture implies that if we just do X or Y, if we meditate or use this crystal, that we can be happy every day. Sunshine vibes, positive mindset with none of the ugly bits. You will never be happy every day. Nobody is. And that goal in itself can be a very distracting pressure. The journey of the hero is about going into the dark caves to then find the treasure. It's not going to be pleasant. It's going to be hard at times, but you have your allies, you have your mentors. And at the end, there is a great transformation. And the second thing is, I just want to acknowledge this, that perhaps you're sitting there at home thinking, well, I don't really feel like my story is very heroic. I'm sitting here in my gym jams, not killing it today or feeling my best self. I can't really relate to that word hero. Well, Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, she just wanted to go home. And that is how her journey began. The hero's journey is really about mastering yourself. And like a snake, there is no hero without the shedding of the skin. There is real work to be done. Now you can see the full journey here. I've picked out the stages that I think can be helpful to us. It all begins with the status quo. That's kind of your ordinary life. When something happens and the hero is kind of forced across the threshold from the known to the unknown. Now I'm going to ask you to think about some moments in your life, some moments of challenge, and then just see if some of these stages resonate. Now, first of all, It always begins with a call to adventure. And often this journey is thrust upon us. So you can see here, this is Dorothy's house. She has killed the Wicked Witch by accident. And so begins her journey. How did your journey begin? Perhaps you lost a job, you've lost a friendship, or even a loved one. Life calls us into this journey. We don't choose it. And sometimes we ignore the call. Have you ever found yourself in a time where you've known here what you need to do? Perhaps leave a job or a relationship or have a difficult conversation, and yet you've just not been able to do it. Now that adventure will keep on calling until it's answered somewhere. And then we have the mentors. So you can see here, with Dorothy, she had the Good Witch. And she comes in and tells Dorothy what she needs to do, gives her these lovely ruby red slippers to protect her. Now, we have all had many teachers. We've all had many teachers in our life. At school, at work, our parents, books we've read, talks that we've watched. And all of those teachers have had teachers. And all of those teachers have had teachers. And all of those teachers have had teachers, and so on and so forth. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is, at this point in time, while you are listening to this talk, you have the weight of centuries of wisdom behind you. Now I'm going to ask you to do a little practice. Close your eyes. And I want you to imagine someone whose judgment you trust. And now imagine you can feel their wisdom around you. What does it feel like to have their wisdom right now? And imagine this wisdom as almost like an energy that's around you. Now slowly open your eyes and imagine carrying on the rest of your day with this feeling of wisdom that you already have. Now the next bit of the journey is the kind of the meat of the movies, which is the test, the enemies and the allies. It's the adventure bit that we all know and get gripped by. So there will be enemies and tests, but there will also be allies. So here we have Dorothy's friends, the lion, the tin man and the scarecrow. Now sometimes when we are in the heights of stress and anxiety, we can feel like we have no support. Now I'm inviting you to think of a stressful period in your life from the past. And then take a piece of paper and write down every single person that has helped you at that time. Maybe a friend who listened one day, a small act of kindness from a stranger. It can be big ways or small ways. A few months after my dad died, I got an email with a letter that he'd written to a magazine. And seeing that after he died, I was very upset and took myself off. I was in Oxford Street tube station in central London. I sat on the tube, a busy tube, and quietly cried to myself. And I remember at the other side of the carriage, there was this young woman with a huge backpack on her shoulders. And she came over and without saying a word, just handed me a tissue. She didn't even wait for me to say thank you, she just went away. And I would never forget that act of kindness. Thank you, whoever you were. And once you have that list, continue that list for the rest of that year. And once you've got to the end of that list, try and see if you can continue that list for other years of your life. And that list will be a very long list, because with every challenge comes support. Now, why am I asking you to write this down? It's because I want your brains to be reminded of the support you have. Now, our brains are extraordinary things. That they are primed, they're physiologically primed for our survival, not for emotional comfort. So this is just a way of just alerting your brain, drawing attention to that support. Now, in moments of despair, come back to that list. Meditate upon that list, and gratitude will come. And the most interesting bit for me is actually the next bit of the journey, which is the inner cave. So this is the bit where the hero has to really step back into themselves and go into the darkness and hear the dragons. Now, at this point in the journey, the hero will always have doubt. Now, if you take the story of the crucifixion, now Jesus, the night before in the Garden of Gethsemane, he is praying to God to be spared. His despair was so great that he sweated drops of blood. Now, if Jesus had been like, great, drill some holes in my hand, hang me up, I'm really looking forward to being crucified, there wouldn't be a hero's journey. You know, it is the fear and the doubt which makes him the hero, which makes it a great act of love. Now, if any point in your life you felt like you're the only one not coping, that's just not true. You felt like there's something wrong with you because you're scared or you have fear. Just remember that it is the fear which not only makes you human, but also the hero. And the next bit is the ordeal, which is, you know, we're back to the witches and the dragons, and it continues often a more dramatic moment. And I guess my question to you is, what are the dragons? Now, in this case, the fears that you need to slay. Now, perhaps you have a difficult question right now. Not sure what to do. Now, I'm going to ask you to list all the fears, the worst case scenario of what you think might happen. And when you've got to the end, ask yourself, and what else? And when you've got to the end, ask yourself, and what else? And doing this brings your fears into your conscious mind. And this is really important because about 95% of our actions and behaviors are actually directed in some way by our unconscious mind. It really helps to bring these up to your conscious mind so you can deal with them, so the fears don't seep out somewhere else. And for each of these points, ask yourself, are these fears really true? You know, our brains have amazing imaginations and can come up with the most extraordinary beasts and dragons, which might feel like they are real, but they're probably not true. And in time, you can start to make friends with these dragons, because these dragons, your fears, are really telling you about real pain that hasn't been heard or digested in some way, that's waiting for compassion. Now, you can see that there are other points of the journey. There is this sort of transformation and the journey back home. But what really makes it a hero's journey is bringing back what you have to your community. You know, how can you make your mess your message? How can you use what you have learned to help other people? And as you can see, we're reminded here that this journey is a cycle. You know, unfortunately, there is no end. Our life just becomes a series of hero's journey. We go back to the beginning, back to the status quo, go back through all the different stages, become changed, and come back into another hero scenario. Now, why am I sharing all this with you? Well, I'm going to come back to our friends at Oz. Now, Dorothy's friends are looking for something. The Tin Man, he really wants a heart, the lion some courage, and the Scarecrow, if only he had a brain. And they all would go with Dorothy to try and find the wizard, hoping he's going to grant them wishes. Now, in the end, there is no great wizard, but the trickster does give them what they asked for. The lion gets a medal for his courage, the scarecrow a diploma, and the Tin Man gets a heart-shaped watch. And what is clear to all of us is that, all of these friends of Dorothy had all of those attributes all along. They all go and rescue Dorothy. So the Tin Man shows that he has a heart because he cares. The lion, his courage, and it's the scarecrow who uses his brains to escape from the witch. Now, sometimes we can spend our entire life, or at least a lot of our energy, looking for external validation of our worthiness or our innate goodness, rather than just trusting and knowing that we actually have all these qualities all along, that we have this goodness inside. In the case of Dorothy, now all she really needed to do was click her famous ruby red slippers and say, "There's no place like home," and she would have gone home immediately. But the Good Witch knew that Dorothy needed to first of all believe in her own power. So I think the most central message of all of these hero journeys is that the journey that we need to make is to overcome our limited beliefs about ourselves. And I just want to be clear, some of these limitations can be put on us from other people because of our race or our gender or sexuality, etc. And the hero's journey teaches us that belief in self comes by taking that call for adventure in the first place. By the acting, not thinking or believing or knowing you're a hero, but just by doing. The next time you're feeling like you've done nothing special, you have nothing to offer really, just think back to all the many hero journeys you've already made, all the transformations. And maybe think about where you are in the hero's journey right now. If it's in the inner cave or the ordeal, remember this too will pass. It's a journey. Now, in the words of Joseph Campbell, we must be willing to get rid of the life we've planned so as to make way for the life that is waiting for us. And if you just remember just one thing, the privilege of a lifetime is to be who you are. The privilege of a lifetime is to be who you are. Thank you for listening. Please feel free to continue the conversation with me at freedomschool.life. I hope you have a fantastic day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amrita. I think your message and your talk really resonates with a lot of people. So thank you. That was great. And now we have a few questions for you.
Sure.
Right. So let's start with the first one. So I imagine a lot of people who have dealt with stress throughout their lives would say stress is just part of me. And we briefly touched upon meditation here, but the question would be, a lot of people think or may think meditation won't change that. It's too late to turn myself around. What do you say to these people, and how not only meditation could help, but perhaps analyzing themselves through the hero's journey, and how can they use that to get rid of stress?
So I have to say that I came to meditation very late in life. I was definitely someone whose mind was always racing, and I always thought, well, definitely is not something that I could do. And I think the truth that I learned was that meditation is all about practice, basically just sitting there and being patient with yourself. And I think there's another myth about meditation that I'd quite like to sort of clear up. But I think a lot of people think that meditation is about emptying your mind. Your mind will never be empty. I mean, that isn't really what meditation's about. What it does is it can help you raise your awareness, helps you just observe and notice your thoughts. So what I like to do when my mind starts racing with like a shopping list or the list of to-dos and things like that is, I just acknowledge that it's a thought. I reset. I recognize. So when I'm sitting down and try to meditate and my mind is racing with lots of shopping lists and to-do lists and lots of worries, I just recognize that it's a thought. And I try to not follow it, but just reset and bring my attention back to my breath. And every time I just recognize, reset, recognize, reset. And then every time you're doing that, you're actually building new neural pathways in your brain. And eventually it just becomes a little bit easier to come back to that breath or to that awareness. But the real truth is, it is just something that is just practice, practice, practice. It isn't a skill or something you're innately born with. It is just by sitting there that you can experience these moments where you get some relief from your analytical thinking mind. You know, in moments of stress, I have felt like I'm the only one. I'm the only one that's going through this experience. I'm the only one that feels like this. I'm the only one that's not good enough or not coping, doesn't have what it takes to do something. And I think when we look at this sort of hero's journey, what's amazing is that all these journeys, all these stories, no matter what country, no matter what time, shows that that is a natural part of life, that you will have these moments where you have doubt, where you have ordeals, where you have all these tests, and you won't know what to do. But eventually, through the process of moving through it, you do come out on the other side. You do have that transformation because of that darkness, because of that cave that you've explored. Actually, I think also something that I think we all naturally like to do is, if you look at the hero's journey, there are these different points. And sometimes we want to skip from one point to the bit where we've become the hero. So you want to sort of skip from the beginning, let's say the call to adventure. Now, in this case, it's probably some great challenge in our life. And we don't really want to spend the time really feeling the negative experiences and really feeling the negative feelings and emotions. So we don't want to sit in the negative feelings. And I think meditation or practices like that really allow you to kind of genuinely kind of experience your real emotions can actually help you move through them. Because sometimes, well, I think what we all naturally do is, when we're feeling sad or not in a great mood, we either numb out or we try and distract ourselves. And that distraction can be watching Netflix, or it can be building $1 billion tech company. I mean, it doesn't really matter what the distraction is, but we're just trying to avoid being with ourselves. And I think what the hero's journey kind of tells me, or can tell all of us, is that, there are these different stages of the journey. There will be the ordeal, there will be the dark cave that you need to go into, and that it's okay, because that is the kind of the cycle. That is the cycle and the reality of life. I think people sometimes look at, some of the messages of Buddhism that talks about life being about suffering. They can think, well, that doesn't sound much fun. But I think actually it's quite reassuring to just realize that life will be a series of these calls to adventure, these challenges that we didn't choose, that have come to us. But if we can be patient, and I guess let ourselves be really in that moment of the journey we're in. So if it's in the difficult bit, really be in that difficult bit, so that you start to digest the fears, that you actually experience these things. But then you can move through to the transformation. I'm going to go back to this idea that, you're a snake that has to shed all of these skins. Now, if you think about it, it's probably not a pleasant experience to shed all of your skin. But that is where the renewal and the rejuvenation comes. So for me, the hero's journey becomes this great kind of reminder that, the fact that it's all stories and all myths and all religions have this common idea that, the hero's journey involves these points. You have your mentors, you have your allies, you'll have the darkness, but there will be a transformation. I think the real sort of skill for all of us, or the real challenge, or maybe something that we need to kind of spend time on is paying attention. It's just really being aware, where are we in this journey? What is happening? How are we learning? How are we transforming? Because the other thing is, we can often go through really difficult bits in our life and we don't even acknowledge or even take a moment to celebrate or recognize what we've come through. Like, I have a friend I was talking to the day who lost a parent recently, and I'm pretty sure that he isn't really thinking about himself as a hero, but what he's experiencing right now, in his grief, in his mourning, in the way that he's looking after his family and even looking after himself. All of this is part of this journey. And I really hope that he or all of us can just take those moments and just look back and go, well, actually, I'm not so bad. Because I think if I tried to sort of say this in the talk, like if you go back through your life, you've already had these journeys. You've already overcome challenges. And I think if we just keep on kind of building that kind of memory almost of, well, let's put it this way. Our brains are kind of primed to remind us of all the stuff that we're not great at, because it's trying to sort of help you survive. And actually, we need these practices. So meditation, gratitude practices, even just sort of writing down, things that we've achieved, to just remind us that we've probably done this before, and just trust in the fact that in the end, it will be fine. And I guess that's the really difficult thing to learn. And for me, my entire life is almost like this journey to keep on learning to sort of, to trust. And I think that's the hardest thing, to trust that this journey will unfold. At one point, you will come to that transformation reward bit of the journey, even if you're in the midst of the really dark bits.
Fantastic, thank you. Interesting points you had. I suppose it's kind of like training the mind in the same sort of logic of kind of like training a muscle as well, because you have to go through things to essentially build up your stamina in a lot of ways. But you can do that through resilience in terms of mental resilience, I suppose. But so okay, let's move on to the next question. If you had unlimited resources to fund one field of research, what would it be?
It's probably more a question of what I'd really like to know, which is, I think we need to be more open as a society about our fears. So in the case of in the story of the hero's journey, let's call them the dragons. And I'd really be curious to understand everybody's fears, almost document all the fears of every single person in the world. Because I do think, and particularly with this kind of, sort of Instagram perfect life sort of world that we live in, that we're not always aware that everybody has, I think, pretty similar fears. And they just manifest themselves in different ways. And what I'd really love to understand is, what are the fears of the people that we think are the most brave in this world? What are the fears of the courageous activists, the fears of those amazing sports people, the people who we might look at and it all just seems so easy for them. I'd really like to understand fear, because I think once you sort of start to acknowledge that and I guess become friends with those dragons, I think there is where some of the compassion, but also some of the reassurance can come from.
I very much agree with you. I think that's a great one. And I think that people would benefit greatly from it just by perhaps understanding fear a little bit more, and therefore being able to sort of be mindful of it and solve it.
And actually it has a function, right? I think that for me is the interesting bit, is that, I found, I have a spiritual practice, but I'm also very interested in the neuroscience of happiness. And I think both of them for me actually are very complementary.
Yeah.
Quite helpful to understand that, you are not your thoughts. right? So we also believe our thoughts. And yesterday, I was having a bad day and all these negative thoughts are kind of flooding through. Now, I didn't have a very good night's sleep the night before. And so I was just aware that, my brain is right now, not functioning in its best way. It's just trying to help me survive. And so what it's going to do is it's going to find all the problems. It's going to be seeking out all the things kind of to protect me. And that's its job. And I think it's really helpful to just sort of, be aware that that's a very sort of natural thing. And actually it means that all the bits are working because it's meant to be finding the problems for you. And I think the spiritual practices and other practices can just help you kind of remember that you have more than your thoughts and the kind of, positive and negative thoughts that kind of, move through your mind. I like the idea of, our minds, being almost like this ocean that has waves of negative and positive thoughts. And the ocean is wide and it can hold all of these things. And for me, the meditation practices and other practices were really about connecting to here. They really help you connect back to that real self and sort of, kind of ignore some of the chaos and the noise.
Thank you. Yeah, interesting point you made there, because when people say, it's called riding the wave, right? When you're in a stressful period, riding the wave, that's fine. But perhaps, and even more so, it's biochemistry having a reaction, right? And perhaps if you would be more mindful of that, and for a fact that something's just going on a little bit, those synapses will change. Perhaps even that will help people. Okay, last question. Amrita, what does happiness mean to you?
So for me, happiness is actually more about joy. And for me, there's a distinction between the two. So, when I think of happiness, I think of being happy or sad. And this can kind of go up and down depending on what's going on that day or that moment. And for me, joy is almost like a core and a way of trying to experience the world. So, even if you are having a terrible day or, things are not going as you wish them to go, you kind of build this kind of joyful muscle so that you're kind of able to respond instead of react. And I think for me, that's, the joyful core allows you to kind of respond to life, almost like treating life like a bit of a dance, where you just have to kind of move with the ups and downs, move with the negatives and the positives, rather than have a kind of fixed state of happiness or sadness. It's just a kind of flow of life. And so when I feel the most kind of joyful, I do feel this kind of sort of flow where it's not that everything's easy, but that I feel very connected. I feel connected to my true self, connected to other people, connected to nature. And you really feel like, you are this kind of, this one extraordinary world that you're part of.